The holidays. A time of the year that everyone loves. It's loved not just because of the mythical fat man who delivers presents to everyone who isn't on the naughty list, but also because of some other aspects. There are Christmas dishes, the way the town gets lighted up, snow, and the fact that work closes to resume in January. During one of these holidays, there's a cafe that stands out. From its exterior, it looks like it's closed for the day, because of how empty it is. Truly it is, as on the inside its staff are closing for the day. As they leave, they bid their boss goodbye, informing her of their intention to return the following day. Their boss, a steamingly hot lady in her 20s, reciprocates the greeting before they exit the cafe. Now that she is all alone, she looks okay at first, until she gets a call from a certain someone that makes her feel uneasy. Now all she can think about is how this person has called so many times. Because of his constant calling, she has mixed feelings, not knowing whether she should pick up the call or just ignore it. She concludes that if she picks the call, she will have to face this man, who doesn't seem too jolly. Even though she doesn't want to take the phone call, the lady knows she needs to find a way to stop him from bothering her. She decides to drop her phone for now, and all thoughts of the man in question along with it. At the moment, the lady feels she has more disturbing problems, like the headache she has now, which is the aftermath of a fever she had a few days ago. The headache is making her head feel hazy and hot, so the lady decides that she has to close up quickly and go home. While she rounds up things at the cafe, the lady makes up her mind to ignore all the calls that will mess with her head and get some rest. Although the lady is inside settling stuff so she can head home, trouble pulls up at her cafe, literally, in a vehicle with tinted black windows. Upon the car's arrival, a certain Hyungnim, as in elder brother, is informed that they have arrived at their destination. The person being referred to as elder brother tosses out his cigarette stick before stepping out to meet his escorts who are waiting on him. The man in question has a vibe darker than the Grinch on Christmas Day. From how serious he looks, it's obvious that the woman from earlier is about to have a bad evening. The guy walks into the cafe, his presence announced by the doorbell, catching the lady's attention. She is currently putting her cafe in order, not looking up when she announces that she is closed for the day. Before she can complete her statement, however, she looks up, noticing the one who just walked into her cafe. She is surprised to see him, stammering out director Jung Yoongyo, and asks how he was able to locate her cafe. Although the poor lady is trying to keep her cool right now, the cold look on this man's face causes her to ask herself why he is here. Jung Yoongyo, instead of going straight to the point and stating the reason for his visit, glares coldly at the lady, prompting her to ask him what he is looking at. He is irritated by her question and throws her one of his, demanding to know how long he has to overlook things. While asking her this, he calls her Choi Jumi, so we'll stick with that. On hearing Jung Yoongyo's question, Choi Jumi notices that his escorts are also in the cafe and begins to panic. She wonders if they are all here because they discovered her secret and starts worrying about her safety. Nonetheless, Choi Jumi keeps her cool. Even when Jung Yoongyo tells her she must have lost track of time while he was away, looks elsewhere, refusing to make eye contact with him. She keeps telling herself that Jung Yoongyo has not figured out her secret and decides to change the topic. On that note, she tells Jung Yoongyo that if he came to her to discuss the recent official gathering, she'll take it upon herself to tell her father about it. Jung Yoongyo, clearly not interested in that, urges Choi Jumi not to worry. He then clicks his tongue in disgust and asks her about the child in her womb, while he points at her stomach. This is what Choi Jumi was trying to hide and is shocked that Jung Yoongyo already knew it. Flustered, she asks Jung Yoongyo how he found out about the baby, but that just annoys him even more. He then accuses Choi Jumi of cheating on him while he was away. His assertion confuses Choi Jumi, who wishes to know what he is talking about. Because he understands Choi Jumi's confusion, Jung Yoongyo goes straight to the point and asks Choi Jumi if the baby in her womb is his. Knowing fully well how shady Jung Yoongyo is, makes it difficult for Choi Jumi to respond at first, but he keeps pushing, demanding to know if she does not intend to answer his question. From the way he is trying to persuade her to talk, Choi Jumi is now certain that Jung Yoongyo is a merciless man and still decides to open up. She confesses that the baby in her womb is not Jung Yoongyo's child, and because of how promiscuous she has been, she doesn't even know who the father of the child is. Her confession makes me wonder if she is trying to fast forward her end or just wants to piss off the already angered Jung Yoongyo even more. As expected, he feels offended, but still gives her a chance to tell him that what she just said is a joke. However, Choi Jumi does not do this. Instead, she boldly tells Jung Yoongyo that he is not the only one she has ever been with. On hearing this, Jung Yoongyo's fury doubles, and he warns Choi Jumi, letting her know that if she is lying, he would be offended, not minding who she is to him. Sounding even more dangerous, Jung Yoongyo makes it clear to Choi Jumi that he does not believe what she is saying, as he does not see her as that type of woman. Choi Jumi, on the other hand, seemingly tired of arguing, permits Jung Yoongyo to believe what he wants to believe. She also adds that it is not his business who the father of the child is and what she would do with the child, and so she urges him to leave. She is acting as if just words ever make the bad guys go away. It's like she doesn't understand the situation she has gotten herself in. So Jung Yoongyo, after letting her act out, tells her to stop saying pointless things and follow him. Normally, he should wait for her to follow him on her own accord, or close up her cafe before she leaves. But instead, he takes her by the hand, abruptly leading her out of her cafe. Choi Jumi, who is probably worried about her cafe or where she is being taken to, tries to tell Jung Yoongyo to stop. In the end, it's either his determination has plugged his ears or he just chooses to ignore Choi Jumi, as all her pleas are futile, and he leads her to his car. When they get to his car, she is shoved in and demands to know where they are going. From the way she is yelling, Jung Yoongyo can tell Choi Jumi is a bit frightened and assures her that she has nothing to worry about. Whether it's to make her feel even better or to assert his dominance even more, I'm not sure. But Jung Yoongyo adds that he does not trade with pregnant women. Before they leave, Jung Yoongyo decides to have a smoke, something Choi Jumi hates, because of the smell of cigarettes. Because of the smoke, she suddenly starts coaching, catching Jung Yoongyo's attention in the process. Noticing that she now has his attention, Choi Jumi complains about how his smoking is a nuisance, and he puts out the cigarette. He then acts gentlemanly, handing over a handkerchief to Choi Jumi to help her deal with the leftover fumes. Even though she is still choking, Choi Jumi refuses Jung Yoongyo's kind gesture. Nevertheless, he does not allow this and compels her to take it. Finally, she takes the handkerchief, still coughing, while she holds on to her stomach. I wonder if the fumes affected the unborn child somehow. Our girl is still coughing, but her mind is on how she never thought of aborting the baby. Her thoughts are interrupted, however, when Jung Yoongyo steps into the car. Choi Jumi, desperate to get out of the position she is in now, tells Jung Yoongyo that he does not need to worry about the unborn child. This is because she does not intend to ask him to take responsibility for the child. Jung Yoongyo agrees, letting her know that he is aware she did not plan on including him in the baby's life. This response takes Choi Jumi by surprise, so much so that she does not answer Jung Yoongyo when he calls out to her. Because of her reaction, he taunts her, claiming that she does not have to act so rashly as he didn't say something as serious as he is planning to marry her. His words end up pissing her off, so she flicks her tongue, but that doesn't stop Jung Yoongyo from spilling his mind. He lets her know that she will have to deal with having him around until she gives birth to the child and orders the driver to take them somewhere so they get food for the baby. Technically, it looks like he is using this to take Choi Jumi on another date, but we'll just have to wait and see. Choi Jumi, who is not interested in this offer, claims that she is fine, urging Jung Yoongyo not to worry about what she has to eat. She keeps pushing, trying to convince Jung Yoongyo to cancel his plans, but he remains adamant, pulling out another stick of cigarette. He is about to light it when he recalls its fumes are not something Choi Jumi is okay with, and puts it away. After putting away the cigarette, Jung Yoongyo does something rather unprecedented, asking Choi Jumi to close her eyes while he pats her head like she is a puppy. She does as he has asked, as she is tired of his games and just wants to get out of this position he is in as quickly as possible. Choi Jumi, while closing her eyes, asks herself how things got to this. She believes that the price she is paying for spending one night with Jung Yoongyo is just too cruel. Since she is holding her stomach while thinking about this, it might mean that Jung Yoongyo might actually be the father of the child, and she is not as wayward as she claims to be. It was just one heated moment, and now Choi Jumi is asking herself if she would have been in this position if she had not met Jung Yoongyo back then. She gives this some thought and concludes that she is wrong. To her, she would have met Jung Yoongyo regardless, likening her relationship with Jung Yoongyo to an ill-fated relationship. In other words, she believes they would have met, even if the both of them never wanted to meet. Due to the position Choi Jumi is in, she cannot help but be lost in thoughts that end up drifting back to the night she met Jung Yoongyo officially and the details of that night. Looking back, plus the position she is in now, Choi Jumi feels her meeting Jung Yoongyo is right in between coincidence and fate. She ends up concluding that it might have been fate. But what really happened that night? Is there anything like a Christmas holiday tale that goes sideways because of something the main character did sometime before the holidays? Nope, there's nothing as good as a twist like this. Now, when did this twist start? Not too long ago, a long time before it even started to snow. This disaster Choi Jumi is experiencing now was born in a luxurious hotel not too long ago on a date with the man Yoongyo. During that date, she looked very unhappy and had barely touched her food. Meanwhile, Jung Yoongyo's food, on the other hand, was untouched. It was 10 in the night, and Choi Jumi wondered why Jung Yoongyo even came for the date she had expected him not to come for. She glared at him from her end of the table, angry at the fact that he was pretty bold to come 3 hours late for a date. She didn't even pay attention to the scary look on his face, and felt awkward about having dinner at such a late time of the night. The worst part was that she was having dinner with Jung Yoongyo. He was a representative and successor of the Woosungs, the largest gang organization in Korea. During their silent dinner, Choi Jumi quietly surveyed the room. Through her survey, she discovered that Jung Yoongyo did not come alone. He had his escorts waiting at the door, which made Choi Jumi feel even more uncomfortable. Since she had no intention to cause Jung Yoongyo harm, she wondered why he brought so many people to a blind date and wished he didn't show up for the date in the first place. As she forced herself to sip her wine, she told herself that if Jung Yoongyo hadn't shown up for the date, she would have told her father that she waited for him, but he did not arrive. It's clear that the only reason why she ended up in this predicament is because she was trying to please her father. It was still because of Choi Jumi's father that she decided to give talking to Jung Yoongyo a try. With this in mind, she asked him if he would like a glass of the wine she tasted and commented on how good it was. This topic she brought up did not move Jung Yoongyo, who kept a straight face and told Choi Jumi that she had time because she was enjoying wine. It was a very absurd question which caught Choi Jumi off guard. From her reaction, he could tell that she did not understand what he was saying and went on to explain what he meant by his earlier statement. According to him, he had given Choi Jumi enough time to run away and sought to know if she was planning to play with him. To show that he was trying to scare her, he referred to himself as Fire. His threats, however, did not move Choi Jumi, who went silent at first, before she sought to confirm if they had met each other a few days ago at the dining table. It happened that a few days before their blind date, Choi Jumi's father invited her to a dinner party where she met Jung Yoongyo for the first time. Back then, Choi Jumi thought she was just going to have one meal with the man. Jung Yoongyo looked calm and collected, unlike the man he turned out to be. Even Choi Jumi did not look like her normal lively self, and thought that after that day she would not see Jung Yoongyo again. She didn't expect to meet him again the way she did, but life has a way of taking us by surprise. Choi Jumi was tired of the dinner date and decided to put an end to it in style. She started by telling Jung Yoongyo that he knew she couldn't live a normal life since she had a gangster father. One of the reasons why she couldn't have a normal life was because whenever her father made up his mind she could not stand up to him. She explained that it was easier to just do what her father wanted and get over with it. Jung Yoongyo didn't understand that Choi Jumi was trying to call off their date. Instead, he felt Choi Jumi was trying to say she felt getting married would help her get free from her dad's annoying nature. Choi Jumi immediately tried to correct the misunderstanding and told him that he was getting her wrong. While trying to explain what she meant, Choi Jumi called Jung Yoongyo by his name, which caused him to immediately stop her from explaining herself. The annoying guy told her that she shouldn't address him by his name since he never told it to her, which pissed Choi Jumi off. Eventually, she wanted to call the date off with some long speech, but because of what he did, she decided to go straight to the point. Firstly, she claimed to understand Jung Yoongyo's position before explaining that even though she was rejected, she didn't feel she had said anything wrong. She then went on to ignore Jung Yoongyo's response and said her name as well as other details about herself. She did this because she saw it as polite for a guest to do so and announced her intention to leave. Choi Jumi also wished him an enjoyable dinner, but before she could leave, Jung Yoongyo halted her by asking her why. Choi Jumi didn't know what he meant at first until he asked her the full question. Why did you drop out? He asked this question because, during Choi Jumi's introduction, she told him that she dropped out of her master's program. Notice how he had lit a cigarette for some time, and Choi Jumi did not read her introduction. Choi Juminded to Jung Yoongi-had's question, and that since they would not be seeing each other anymore, it would have been boring for her to tell him the narrative of what led to her dropping out. Still, with a cold expression on his face, Jung Yoongyo asked Choi Jumi whether they saw again or not was not in her hands. She did not know how to answer his question and decided to leave like she originally intended to do. Choi Jumi even lied that she had a great time to try and fool Jung Yoongyo, but I doubt that was necessary. Nevertheless, I'm sure Choi Jumi felt that with that she was free until Jung Yoongyo signaled to his men who were at the door. One of them who understood the sign came forward and informed Jung Yoongyo that he had the car on standby. Choi Jumi was confused immediately by their conversation. She was probably wondering why the man she bid goodbye to was getting up to leave all of a sudden. Jung Yoongyo, on the other hand, instructed the guy who came to answer his call to leave with the others immediately. A surprised Choi Jumi sought to know what was going on, and Jung Yoongyo told her that since she was on her way out, he wanted to escort her. As soon as Jung Yoongyo put on his coat, he made his way to the door and left Choi Jumi trying to catch up to him while she tried to put words together and tell him she did not need his help. As her words were not coming forth, Jung Yoongyo decided to use her previous claim that she had a good time against her. It looked like he was trying to punish her for lying, and she began to wonder what was up with Jung Yoongyo all of a sudden. It didn't make sense to her that Jung Yoongyo wanted to escort her home when he came 3 hours late for their date. When they got outside the hotel, Choi Jumi was finally able to put her words together. She told Jung Yoongyo that he didn't have to worry about her since she could go on her own. It was like the stubborn guy was deaf at the time because he ignored what she said and asked her if she wanted him to open the door for her before she got in. Without waiting for a response, nevertheless, Jung Yoongyo opened the door for Choi Jumi, an act that made her accept defeat and get into his car. Jung Yoongyo's stubbornness reminded me of what Choi Jumi said earlier about her dad and how he could not be convinced to change his mind from doing what he wanted to do. Maybe that was how all top gangsters were, which was why she decided to listen to him instead of arguing further. Anyway, the drive to Choi Jumi's residence at first had similarities to their weird date that ended a few minutes before they left. The drive was quiet and made her feel uncomfortable. It was because of the feeling of being uncomfortable that Choi Jumi wanted to leave on her own. After a few minutes of silence, Jumi informs Jung Yoongyo that he could just drop her off near the K building. Then she glanced over at him, only to discover that he was so focused on driving. She started to think about how her father's orders put her in the position she was in. She also thought about how she did not want to go on a blind date with a gangster, even though it was to please him. After harboring this thought, Jung Yoongyo gave it a second thought and concluded that the position she was in was to be expected. She was the daughter of a gangster, so meeting up with another gangster is something she felt was not that odd. Choi Jumi even believed that she was going to get married to a gangster, which made her give up on real love and see it as a hopeless dream. At one point, while she soliloquized, Jung Yoongyo glanced over at her without saying a word. Nevertheless, Choi Jumi's silence became even louder the moment she picked up her phone and read a certain text message. Some Heesun person was informing her of news about a guy named Jung Young getting married soon. For this to happen at the time when she had given up on true love, to me, was a huge stab. The night after Choi Jumi's date with Jung Yoongyo, she resumed work at her cafe early. While she was at the cafe, however, she got a call from someone who reminded her that she told her to come home. Choi Jumi refused to do so once more and claimed she was busy, even though we know that as the boss, she can have days off whenever she wants. It was clear that she did not want to go home at the moment, but she promised the caller that she would visit during the week. The caller was unwilling to cast aside the topic of Choi Jumi coming home and went on to tell her the reason for the call. According to the caller, everyone around Choi Jumi was either getting married, engaged, or was sending out invitation cards. The caller then attacked Choi Jumi for making coffee during such a golden weekend. Nevertheless, this comment did not bug Choi Jumi, who simply agreed. She added that it was because of her devotion during times like this that she took the lead in the cafe business. The caller was Choi Jumi's mother, and she decided not to push the topic any further. In a bid to change the topic, Choi Jumi's mother told her that she woke up every morning in cold sweat, every time she thought about a certain thing. She confessed that she could not believe that her husband, Choi Jumi's father, would put Choi Jumi in the position she is in. She asked Choi Jumi if it wasn't enough that she already had a gangster husband and now is supposed to add a gangster son-in-law to the mix. The question only caused images of Jung Yoongyo to flash in Choi Jumi's mind, which reminded her of the previous night and what Jung Yoongyo said about their next meeting being her decision. Choi Jumi tries to concentrate on the call and not Jung Yoongyo, assuring her mother that she didn't have to worry since nothing happened after the date. Choi Jumi's mother, out of concern, declared that she made a mistake and should have stopped her husband when he offered to set Choi Jumi up with Jung Yoongyo. It was after the date that Choi Jumi's mother saw how large her mistake was and blamed her husband, Choi Jumi's father, for trying to drag his daughter deeper into the gangster world she was already in. During Choi Jumi's call with her mother, the cafe's doorbell rang and caught Choi Jumi's attention. Because of this, she had to postpone her talk with her mother and went on to attend to her customer. The customer, a guy who looked like some cool student, ordered a latte. Upon closer inspection, the customer looked a lot more geekish, but when Choi Jumi went on to prepare his order, he glared at her in a very strange way. It looked like he was on a mission, but he took his latte and went to have a seat once it was brought for him. However, as he left, Choi Jumi's female employee seemed to notice him. She even felt something was off about the guy and decided to air out her suspicions to Choi Jumi. Apparently, she had noticed that the guy came to the cafe too often, a point that didn't cause Choi Jumi to worry because she felt the guy was a regular at the cafe. Even so, Choi Jumi's employee did not see the man as any other normal customer. She explained to Choi Jumi that every time the man came, he sat in front of the order counter and stared at them. It almost sounded as if the only reason why he ordered there was so that he could stare at them. Choi Jumi's employee also added that the guy only stared at Choi Jumi, and this caused Choi Jumi to take another look at the guy. We all know he's going to pop up sometime later. Even Choi Jumi's employee suspects him, but Choi Jumi sees the guy as normal. She believed that what they were feeling may just have been on their mind and urged her employees not to speculate. As soon as Choi Jumi addressed this, she got a text message from that Heesun person from yesterday. Heesun wanted to know if Choi Jumi was going to attend Jung Hyung's engagement party, but the text message only made her look nervous. Because of the text message, Choi Jumi informed her female employee that she would be out by midnight and permitted her employee to leave when her shift ended. Later that day, some event center, known as the Class, popped up. Inside the event center were a man and woman in wedding attire. With how happy the couple looked, it was obvious that Choi Jumi was at Jung Hyung's engagement party. As the event went on, someone complained about how annoying the engagement party was. It was the lady beside Choi Jumi who was complaining, and she kept on complaining about how the bride could, after being so ruthless and stealing someone else's man. Choi Jumi didn't say a word, and the angry-looking lady misunderstood this and assured Choi Jumi that she was there for her. Choi Jum, on the other hand, urged her friend to calm down and asked her when the man getting married was ever her man. Weirdly, Choi Jumi was the one who was supposedly stolen from, and she looked so cool about it. In the end, if that guy was what she missed to gain Jung Yoongyo, then she was lucky. Choi Jumi's friend who brought up the topic reminded her that once upon a time, the guy getting married liked her, and everyone knew he did. She wanted to keep talking when Choi Jumi stopped her and stated that from the way things went, it was nothing more to him liking her. Choi Jumi's friend was not having this. She blamed Choi Jumi for being so rational. She explained to Choi Jumi that there was a reason for everything, and they were talking about her being stabbed in the back by an alleged friend. Choi Jumi just laughed about the matter before she assured her friend that there was nothing she could do about this guy leaving her. This was because she did not think anyone would want to marry a gangster's daughter. The celebration continued long into the night, and still Choi Jumi stayed. At the reception, Choi Jumi and her hot-headed friend sat at the bar and continued their discussion. During this discussion, her friend informed her that she was shocked by her reaction to the engagement. She expected Choi Jumi to cause a ruckus when she came, but instead, she disappointed her by acting so soft. Choi Jumi explained to her friend that she was invited, which was why she had to attend the wedding. Say she didn't attend the wedding, she was aware that people would feel she was jealous, and she did not want that for herself. Although her friend did not fully agree with her opinion, she wanted to know how Choi Jumi was not angry when she looked at the new couple. Choi Jumi replied that she wanted to see this for herself. She explained that whenever she saw him happy with another woman besides her, she felt like she finally let go of him without any regrets. In other words, she was doing this for closure and finally felt relieved. Her friend eventually gave in and encouraged Choi Jumi to forget about Jung Hyung. She stated that there were many other men in the world, and she was ready to introduce her to someone if she wanted. From Choi Jumi's reaction to her offer, her friend decided to pull back and asked her about the blind date she went for instead. Again, this brought back to Choi Jumi thoughts of a guy she was trying to forget. Nevertheless, she kept her cool and told her friend that the blind date was okay, and she only went on the blind date because her father wanted her to. Choi Jumi's response partly annoyed her friend. She felt bad for Choi Jumi and decided that they should kill the topic of men and dates. She also playfully warned Choi Jumi not to think of going home that night, and she agreed to adhere to the warning. The pair then went back to enjoying the reception. Suddenly, when Choi Jumi asked for another martini in the crowd, she spotted the weird guy who came to her cafe earlier that day. Scary, right? He was in the same clothes and turned away the second he realized she had spotted him. Choi Jumi, feeling frightened, remembered what her employee said back at the cafe and got even more frightened. Her friend immediately noticed her change in mood and asked her if she spotted anyone she recognized, but Choi Jumi claimed she felt she didn't. Deep down, she suspected that she was seeing things because she was sensitive about the engagement. She told herself that the weird customer was not stalking her, but we all know he is, and it's only a matter of time before we get to know why. Nonetheless, Choi Jumi decided to leave the reception immediately. She brought up an excuse that her boyfriend called her all of a sudden, and she was going to leave and see her next time. Choi Jumi's friend claimed to be tired as well and wished Choi Jumi a safe journey home. As Choi Jumi headed home, it was late and so quiet that Choi Jumi could hear footsteps behind her. She was being followed by that creep, but when she looked back, she saw no one. Because of this, Choi Jumi felt she was just hearing things. Choi Jumi felt a creepy stare on her back for a while. She claimed to have had the feeling before. It happened back when she was in college that a man who was in a power struggle with her gangster father got someone to follow her and threaten her. For a while, the man kept bugging her, but eventually she was able to get rid of him, but she was suddenly feeling that chilling gaze again. Worried, Choi Jumi increased her pace. She also recalled that back in college she was okay because she had Jung Yoongyo with her, but now she was all on her own and in an alley. She was afraid, but considered the possibility of what she was feeling just being her imagination playing tricks on her. All of a sudden, Choi Jumi stopped before a car side mirror and stared at it. As she stared, she spotted the reflection of the creepy customer and was startled. Out of fear, her feet glued to the floor, only for her heart to sink the moment she heard someone call her name and turned back to see who it was. Luckily for her, when she turned, she saw her mother. Out of concern, her mother asked her why she was so startled. She was unable to respond properly as she was trying to catch her breath. Her mother, still out of concern, asked her why she was not answering her calls. She also wanted to know why Choi Jumi was going home at such late time. Choi Jumi, after being interrogated by her mother, instead of answering her mother's questions, asked her questions of her own. She wanted to know what time her mother arrived at her place of residence and what she was doing there at such late a time. Her mother quickly responded, informing her that she came to see her to tell her something. She also wanted to know if Choi Jumi drank alcohol because she suspected she did, and Choi Jumi affirmed her suspicions. The mother and daughter then, in where it was warmer, to discuss. Choi Jumi served her mother with tea to fancy up their discussion a little bit, and her mother had a sip before disclosing the reason for her visit. Her reason was that she wanted to know how Choi Jumi's blind date went. Choi Jumi, who was tired of discussing that topic, told her mother that as she had explained to her various times, she and Jung Yoongyo decided to part ways. Choi Jumi's mother was happy to hear this and informed Choi Jumi that she had prepared a new date for her. She wants Choi Jumi to meet up with the new date that weekend. Choi Jumi, though uninterested in the offer, asked her mother who her date was. Her mother informed her that her date was the son of the head of the Woosung hospital. She then announced her annoyance that they did not jump on this opportunity of this new date, back when they first heard about him. With her mother sounding the way she did, Choi Jumi became even more frustrated and asked her why she was also behaving like her father. Because of her words, her mother was unable to keep her cool any longer. She yelled at the top of her voice about how frustrated she was about her husband's choice of a son-in-law and wanted to rest her head. She was worried about Choi Jumi, her only daughter, and did not want Choi Jumi to be sacrificed to live a gangster-related life because of her husband's office matters. Even though Choi Jumi's mother was acting out, Choi Jumi did not buy her act. When Choi Jumi's mother discovered that Choi Jumi was unto her, she accidentally spilled her tea in shock. Choi Jumi, who was very frustrated at the time, told her mother that the only reason why she came up with her suggestion was so that people would call her the in-law of a hospital's head. Well, her mother looked like the type of person who always wants to show off. So I believe what Choi Jumi is saying. She gets worried about what her father would do if he found out her mother's plan and asked her what she would do about it if the man found out. Surprisingly, Choi Jumi's mother advised her to share this with her father, with the hopes that things with the son of the head of the hospital would work. She also provided Choi Jumi with a hint that she could run away with the son of the head of the hospital if they ended up liking each other, and her father would not be able to do anything about that. Once more, she advised Choi Jumi to talk to her father and make him understand, when she could have done it by herself. All this, plus Jung Yoongyo, the engagement party and the stalker, helped in tiring Choi Jumi out, so she told her mother that she needed to rest. It was then her mother had a look at the time and discovered how late it was. Because of the time, she supported Choi Jumi's decision to have some rest, but before she left, she assured her she would set up the date and let him know the details. Finally, as Choi Jumi's mother left, she was all alone and collapsed on her bed, asking herself why the day was so long. As the winter came close, Choi Jumi could feel its signs and sense that something out of the ordinary was about to happen to her. In truth, it did. But let's get back to what led to Choi Jumi ending up pregnant, and in Yoongyo's web. The day came for the date, but once more Choi Jumi felt uncomfortable. This was because her mother had chosen the same hotel she went to when she had a date with Jung Yoongyo. She could see that things for her and this new guy were starting off on the wrong foot. She tried to keep her cool and told herself that all she had to do was have one meal with the guy and go back home. After the meal, she did not intend to contact this guy again, but while she was mapping out her plan, someone handed over a complimentary card to her. When she looked up, it was the guy she was to meet, and he introduced himself as Lee Taeju. He then sought to confirm if he was speaking with Choi Jumi and told her that he heard so much about her from her mother. Choi Jumi agreed that she was the one he was looking for, formally introduced herself, and told Lee Taeju that it was nice to meet him. With bright smiles on his face, Lee Taeju asked Choi Jumi if she had trouble getting there, but she was unmoved by his kindness. She saw him as the same as every other guy she had come across, because it looked like he had a motive. The way she saw it, it was a setup between both parents, her mother who wanted to be called a hospital heads-in-law and a hospital head who wanted to use Woosung's power. She saw this date as similar to the one she had with Jung Yoongyo, and we can't blame her for feeling that way. A week ago, she went on a date to please her dad, and a week after she went on a date to please her mom. That's sad. Lee Taeju, a man who came prepared, tried to flatter Choi Jumi by complimenting her looks, but she smiled at the fact that he was a smooth talker. She could also tell he wasn't new to the dating world and was going to be entertained by his efforts to impress her. As she gave no response to Lee Taeju's flattery, he felt she did not believe him, and explained that what he was doing was out of honesty and not just to flatter her. Choi Jumi then tells him that she didn't react the way she did because of him. Lee Taeju did not understand what she meant, but at the time she was comparing Lee Taeju with Jung Yoongyo. A week ago, Jung Yoongyo had sat in the same spot as Lee Taeju, but unlike Jung Yoongyo, she saw Lee Taeju as natural and sensible. Lee Taeju didn't keep her waiting 3 hours, as Jung Yoongyo did. He also didn't treat the food before like an unwanted offering, something Jung Yoongyo did. Lastly, unlike Jung Yoongyo, Lee Taeju did not use his food as an ashtray. Because of her memories from her date with Jung Yoongyo, Choi Jumi started smiling awkwardly. She began to wonder why she was thinking about such a horrible date and assured a curious Lee Taeju that she was okay. In the end, she told herself that the only reason why she remembered Choi Jumi was because they were in the same restaurant where her last date was held. Because Choi Jumi clarified, Lee Taeju told her that he was glad he did not make her feel bad and asked if they could begin with their meal. With that, the date continued, lasting long into the night. As the date went on, Lee Taeju kept on talking about stuff that didn't really interest Choi Jumi, which made her wonder if she should just round up with her coffee and leave. She was lost in thought about what to do. When Lee Taeju managed to snap her out of her lost state and wanted her to tell him more about herself. She was about to do so when she spotted something that caught her attention. It was Jung Yoongyo, and he was with her father. Talk about a date gone bad. Immediately, she recalled that her mother warned her not to tell her father about her date with Lee Taeju because of the fuss he would make if he found out. Her mother had also told her that she had no intention of giving up on her plan since it regarded her daughter's marriage. What was to be a secret ended up being discovered prematurely. To make things worse, Jung Yoongyo spotted her with Lee Taeju and immediately got annoyed. Still angry, he walked over to Choi Jumi's table and glared at her before walking away. As soon as he left, her father walked by and coughed to show her that he had seen her. As Choi Jumi's father, Jung Yoongyo, and his escorts left, Choi Jumi immediately started feeling unwell, and Lee Taeju wanted to know if she was okay. She claimed to be fine, but deep down, all she could think about was how she had never expected a date that started on the wrong foot would lead to her meeting Jung Yoongyo again. She told herself that she didn't need to feel scared. Even though she was going to be scolded by her father, she believed that she didn't have to feel bad because there was nothing between her and Jung Yoongyo. So it wasn't like she cheated on him. With all that in mind, Choi Jumi wondered why her heart was beating so fast. And her hands were shaking. She also didn't understand why her father was at the hotel. She saw it as a problem and was not ready to deal with the brunt of her parents' issues at the moment. From Choi Jumi's thoughts, it sounded like her father and mother separated a while back, which would explain the disunity in the choice of a son-in-law among Choi Jumi's father and mother. Not too long after her father left, she saw a message from him demanding her presence. Her father was no gentleman, and also was not a man who was okay with being kept waiting. Choi Jumi got up and told Lee Tae-ju that she had to leave. He was curious to know why, so she explained to him that she had some family issues to attend to. That marked the end of their date, but Lee Tae-ju promised her he'd call her, and she reluctantly encouraged him to do so before wishing him a safe journey home. With Lee Tae-ju handled, Choi Jumi went to see her father. As she walked through the silent hallway that led to where her father was, she asked herself how she ended up in the situation she was in. She stopped for some reason and decided to go through her phone, only for the weird customer to pop up behind her. She could feel his presence, and her heart raced. It was already bad as it was, but then she felt his breath on her neck, which caused her to drop her phone and fall to her knees. Choi Jumi was clearly frightened and asked herself if the creepy customer from before had come back for her. Jumi told herself that the creepy customer couldn't be at the hotel and continued advancing to her destination as fast as she could. Luckily for her, she was able to safely get to the room where her dad and Yoongyo were waiting for her. At that point, it was like her date with Tae-ju never took place, but I'm sure he won't be missed though. Back to Jumi, who was spotted by Yoongyo's lackeys when she got to the room. Although she must not have liked the men, because of the position Jumi was in, it's safe to say she was glad to see them. Nonetheless, while Jumi was busy catching her breath, because of all the sprinting she did, one of Yoongyo's lackeys informed him of her arrival. Not too long after that, Jumi was let into the room, where she was greeted by ice-cold glares. It also looked like her father was pouring liquor for Yoongyo when she entered. However, that's not something that should surprise us, since the man was ready to do anything to boost his street credit. Although he seemed angry at Jumi, when the lackey told her she could go in, her father acted all nice. He acted like a little boy trying to get his friend to sit with him and called her to sit by him, while Yoongyo silently sipped his liquor. Since this was Jumi's second time meeting Yoongyo, she had this debate in her mind on whether some person was who she suspected that person to be. She finally concluded that it was him and sat by her father, looking very remorseful, not letting us know who she was referring though. Obviously, it sounds like the person on Jumi's mind was Yoongyo, but no, it was actually the creepy customer. Jumi was so lost in thought that she didn't even notice the angry expression on her father's face. Her father then decided to bring up the date Jumi had earlier by claiming Jumi had a light meal with a friend. He then offered to pour Jumi a glass of what he claimed was her favorite wine, and all she did was stretch out her cup to him. Our girl's mind was too busy to pay attention to her father's desire to please Yoongyo, and Yoongyo stared at her coldly. What was on Jumi's mind was the creepy customer, who she noticed had been following her from place to place. Jumi concludes that the creepy customer is the person who her employee told her was a regular at the cafe, and also the guy she saw staring at her at the bar. Jumi at the moment was scared and confused and asked herself if that guy was stalking her. It was then she remembered her friend's words about how stalking was a pain in the neck. The lady sounded like she had some experience with stalkers and claimed that they were very hard to punish. According to her, even with clear evidence of the act, the offender would not face any serious punishment. The other day when her friend brought up the topic of stalkers, Jumi did not feel nervous, but now she did. She wondered if her being in the same place with the creepy customer was just some coincidence, and if she was being too sensitive because she had been stalked before. Even when it happened the first time, all Jumi got from her dad was that she should listen to him. He assured her that his way was better since it would lead her to a stable life, instead of her way, which he saw as fruitless. He had always wanted to control her life and doesn't really know how she talked him into letting her start her own business. In the end, Jumi is certain that if he rather heard about the second stalker, he would ask her to return home. Jumi ended up concluding that since her feeling insecure had started only a few days back, it would be wise for her to wait and see how things played out in the next few days. Jumi was too worried and lost in thought that her mind was light years away from the conversation that was going on before her. It was not until she heard Yoongyo say, "Here we go," that her mind returned to the discussion at the table. From Jumi's reaction, the men could tell that she had not been listening all along, but Jumi didn't notice their stares and asked Yoongyo what he said. Yoongyo surprisingly repeated his earlier statement, which was that Jumi was quite close to the friend she was seated with downstairs. Sure, the friend everyone was talking about was Lee Taeju, who we might never see again, but his impact remained. Jumi, while trying to act cool, said the first thing that came to her mind and agreed that she and Taeju were close. However, Jumi's response did not sit well with her father. He was literally boiling in rage beside her, like a bomb that was about to explode. When Jumi eventually spotted her father and the look on his face, she could tell that she was in more trouble and immediately rephrased. To calm the situation down, Jumi lied to Yoongyo that she had come to the hotel for a meal and just happened to run into the guy. She then tried to appease her father by asking Yoongyo how he was doing and claiming that she wanted to contact him sooner. Yoongyo smiled on hearing this, something that was very strange to begin with. As shocking as it was, all that was on Jumi's mind when she saw the smile was that Yoongyo had dimples. She also observed that even when Yoongyo didn't smile properly, his lips curled up slightly. For a man so cold, Jumi finds it strange that Yoongyo has dimples and concludes that the guy has it all. It was surprising that Yoongyo was acting so kind, offering to pour Jumi a drink since he assumed she had been drinking with her friend a while back. Even though Jumi accepted this kind gesture, she looked so pathetic, like someone praying for something to get her out of the midst of Yoongyo and her father. All of a sudden, Yoongyo reminded Jumi that she said she had a good time. It was a very vague statement, but that didn't make Yoongyo explain what he meant by what he said. Instead, Yoongyo went on to tell Yoongyo that from his observation, he had noticed she was involved in a lot of pleasant encounters. This helped Jumi understand that Yoongyo had been making reference to the dinner date she was having with Taeju before he arrived. As if she owed the man anything or was dating him, Jumi tried to explain herself again. Before she could say anything, however, her father stepped up and vouched for her. He claimed she didn't go for a lot of outings and was quiet and reserved, but Yoongyo claimed the matter at hand had nothing to do with being quiet and reserved. Indicating that he was about to leave, Yoongyo put out his cigarette and rose. His move surprised Jumi's father, but even so, that didn't stop him from trying to please Yoongyo by telling Jumi to get up as well. Jumi, who was already in a lot of trouble, simply obeyed and joined the group of her father and Yoongyo's lackeys to see Yoongyo out. Jumi had been feeling uncomfortable all along and couldn't wait to get out of there, so she told her father of her intention to leave first. Jumi's father, as expected, did not welcome Jumi's idea and glared at her as if he was trying to tell her that they had things to discuss. Because of the way Jumi's father glared at her, she knew she had to stay back, so she told him not to worry about her request to leave. When the crew finally got to Yoongyo's car, everyone bowed respectfully, including Jumi and her father. As they bowed, they wished Yoongyo a safe journey home, but his leaving meant that Jumi's scolding was about to start. This caused Jumi to worry a lot. She had no intention of her father finding out what was up, without her mom's permission, and knew that she was in big trouble. Luckily for our girl, Yoongyo noticed how disturbed she looked and called out to her. Coldly, he offered to give her a ride home, since he heard when she said she wanted to head home. This surprised everyone, including Jumi's father, but stuff like this is what the man wants, right? Surprisingly, Jumi hesitated, which made Yoongyo feel like she had rejected his offer. Feeling insulted, Yoongyo took back his offer. Immediately, he turned to his driver and was about to leave when Jumi rushed to his car. She was able to stop him from heading off, just in time, and begged him to drop her off where he dropped her last time. On hearing Jumi's plea, Yoongyo glared at her like he was about to say no, but in the end, he let her tag along. As his car sped through the less busy late-night streets of South Korea, he and Jumi sat inside silently. To ease the mood in the car, Jumi decided to humbly thank Yoongyo for giving her a ride. It should have been enough, but a proud Yoongyo asked Jumi if she wasn't supposed to thank him more politely. Immediately, Jumi told Yoongyo that she was grateful, but began to ask herself why this guy helped her in the first place. She wondered if this kindness was the effect of Yoongyo being drunk because he had few glasses of whiskey, but the guy looked too okay to be drunk. As the car returned to its silent state, Jumi decided to peep at Yoongyo. Unfortunately for her, all she did was end up locking eyes with Yoongyo, who was staring at her coldly. Instead of looking away, Jumi decided to observe Yoongyo's eyes. From her observation, she discovered that Yoongyo's eyes did not carry friendliness or hostility. In fact, she saw no emotion in his eyes. This made Jumi even more curious to know why Yoongyo helped her out, so she decided to ask him herself. When Jumi finally asked Yoongyo why he helped her, he confessed that he didn't even know he was helping her. The way Yoongyo declares this is so cold, but not cold enough to fool Jumi. She can tell Yoongyo is lying, and he gave her a lift, because from the second she was caught, he knew she was going to get into trouble. Jumi was also aware that Yoongyo knew she was not having fun when she was with him and her father. Once again, summons up courage, and this time tells Yoongyo that he was lying when he said he didn't know he was helping her. Her response managed to create a smile on Yoongyo's face, which she noticed. Yoongyo's clear act of kindness then threw Jumi into some deep thinking again, and she told herself that it was better sometimes to dream than for your dream to come true. She just didn't want to believe that such a cold-hearted person could help her out, since he had no reason to help her in the first place. She recalled that Yoongyo had made her wait there hours before he showed up for their blind date a week ago, and was really rude when he came. Because of his rudeness, she was out in a tuff, and told herself that all that was enough reason for her not to forgive him so easily. When they finally arrived at Jumi's apartment complex, she asked for the driver to stop the car, which he did. Reaching home was the best thing that could happen to Jumi at that point, and all she could think about was how she needed to rest properly. With that in mind, she attempted to leave the car, but was stopped by Yoongyo when he said that something was up with her skirt. Jumi didn't understand what Yoongyo meant until she turned back and saw that her skirt was caught under Yoongyo's leg. The man could have raised his leg without calling Jumi's attention to it, but decided to create a scene and make Jumi feel uncomfortable. Jumi then began to caution herself for choosing to wear a skirt that night. After arranging her clothes, Jumi thanked Yoongyo for the ride, bid him good night, and then stepped out of his car. Once she was out of the car, Jumi entered into her apartment complex and heaved a sigh of relief. According to her, she felt like she was going to die from anxiety in the car, as being around Yoongyo made her nervous. Jumi also saw Yoongyo as a scary person, but her thoughts about Yoongyo faded the second she remembered her father. She was still going to have to deal with him sooner or later, and was not ready to face him, since she didn't know what to tell him. Because of overthinking and lack of concentration, Jumi accidentally dropped her phone, and it fell a few floors down. Indeed, Jumi was having a bad day, and this made her conclude that nothing about the day was going her way. While leaning on the railings, Jumi heard a sound that caught her attention. What followed was an image of the creepy customer, and it looked like he had followed Jumi into her apartment complex. Jumi could tell from the sound that was made that someone was on the stairs above her, and she began to panic. While trying to stay as still and silent as possible, Jumi shook, wondering what she was to do. To her, she could either watch and see what happened, call the police, or run away. She had not fully decided what action she was going to take when she looked down at her phone and its cracked screen again. Things were already bad for Jumi, but then her phone started to ring while she was thinking of a way out of her situation. Jumi didn't know if it was wise for her to head home because she feared for her safety. She also didn't know if taking the call was a wise idea until she thought about using the phone call to get out of the building. For all she knew, the person a few stairs above her didn't know she was onto him, so she planned on heading downstairs and taking her phone and picking up the call like all was well. With that call, she intended to exit the building naturally, but then she decided that once she grabbed her phone, she should run out immediately. Jumi already had a plan and was already carrying it out when the ringtone she used for her mother's calls began to play. Knowing the type of person her mother was, she thought to herself that her mother called at the wrong time. Unmoved by the call, Jumi kept dashing down the stairs with the intention of grabbing her phone and running out. She got her phone just in time, but tripped and fell because of the heels she had on her feet. Even after falling, Jumi prayed that she got out safely, got up from the floor, and kept running. When she finally exited the apartment complex, Jumi spotted Yoongyo's car and rushed to it. When she got to the car, she banged on it, begging for Yoongyo to help her. Hastily, Yoongyo stepped out of the car and rushed to Jumi to hear what she had to say. Even though the guy was trying to hide it, however, it was clear that he was worried about Jumi because of the way she was behaving. When Yoongyo gets close, Jumi begins to pour out everything she had been keeping inside about this case for the past few days. She didn't hesitate to tell Yoongyo that she felt like someone was stalking her, and she had been feeling that way for a couple of days. Yoongyo said nothing and just patiently listened to Jumi as she went on to tell him that she thought she saw the same person watching her at the hotel and the bar. Jumi was so scared that she began to cry, and then she told Yoongyo that just a few minutes ago, she heard a puffer jacket coming from the stairs. Yeah, the creepy customer had a puffer jacket on him all along, but what was funny was that because of fear, Jumi was pulling on Yoongyo's suit without even knowing. On a normal day, he would have caused a scene and made Jumi feel bad, but this was an emergency, so he took Jumi by the hand and led her away. Curious, Jumi asked where they were going, and Yoongyo told her that he was escorting her into her apartment. Jumi was surprised by this show of kindness, but she just quietly followed Yoongyo. She was also experiencing a surge of emotions as Yoongyo held her hand, but the most dominant thing she was feeling was relief. When they got to the apartment, Yoongyo asked Jumi to open the door, and when she did so, he walked into the apartment while she waited outside. Jumi was waiting for Yoongyo to check if the coast was clear. Meanwhile, the guy was acting all Sherlock Holmes-like, as if he was a master detective. After having a short look around, he walked over to Jumi and asked her if her apartment was always that way. It was a vague question, but it also meant that Yoongyo was onto something. Suddenly, all Yoongyo's attention was on a device attached to the wall outside her department. Jumi, on spotting the gadget, felt that was supposed to be a fire alarm. Sure, it looked like one, but when Jumi looked even more closely, she discovered that it was not a fire alarm. She understood that the device looked like a fire alarm, but then she realized that the fire alarm that used to be there was installed slightly to the right. As Yoongyo reached for the device and detached it, Jumi asked if it was some kind of secret or hidden camera. Yoongyo, while observing the device, stated that based on the lack of evidence of forced entry into Jumi's home, this device would have been installed that day or the day before. He added that when he had a look around her house, he did not see any signs of an installation inside her house. Jumi got scared on hearing this. She recalled that Yoongyo said there were no signs of forced entry into her home, so she suspected that the mystery person knew her password. To confirm, she asked Yoongyo if he was trying to say the person knew her password, and he affirmed her suspicions. Jumi started to panic even more on hearing this, realizing that on that day the mystery person could have broken into her home. The next thing that came to Jumi's mind was to call the police, so she picked up her phone and tried to dial the emergency number. Jumi's fear had already hit the maximum, so dialing the number was next to impossible. Due to fear, she accidentally dropped her phone, but before she could pick it up, Yoongyo picked it up. Jumi asked Yoongyo to give her the phone so that she could report the incident, but instead, he crushed her cell phone even more with his bare hands. This shocked Jumi, and she sought to know why Yoongyo did what he did. She then asked him if he was trying to act like a gangster right now, and he just flicked his tongue out of annoyance. Yoongyo also added that he hates being bothered, so Jumi pushed him, demanding that he leave. All of a sudden, she stopped trying to push Yoongyo out, as she recalled that she needed his help. She apologized for what she said and told Yoongyo that if something happened to her because of the stalker, he would be held accountable. She also held on to Yoongyo's hand and urged him to help her out by telling him that there was no guarantee that the stalker would not come back for her. Yoongyo, who was getting annoyed by how desperate Jumi seemed, asked her to slow down and demanded to know who was chasing her. Nevertheless, instead of answering the question, Jumi still asked Yoongyo to hand over her phone. Coldly, Yoongyo asked Jumi if she wasn't aware that her father would work faster than the police. But out of shock, she didn't really get what Yoongyo was saying. This annoyed Yoongyo, asked Jumi if asking twice was a habit she had. After all, this wasn't the first time she had done it. Although she didn't want to tell Yoongyo what was on her mind, Jumi knew that if she involved her father, things would get worse for her. Her father never approved of her leaving home, and this would just be a reason for him to ask her to return home. Jumi also believed that if Yoongyo knew that, he would take her to her parents' house immediately. Jumi hadn't said anything to Yoongyo, but then he smiled all of a sudden and tossed her phone away. Jumi panicked because of her already damaged phone and rushed to her phone. Out of anger, she looked back at Yoongyo like she wanted to beat him up, but he didn't even notice this. While she was busy being angry at Yoongyo, the man had already gotten to work. He was already on a call with a certain Gwangmi. Yoongyo told the Gwangmi guy that he was trying to find someone. He asked Gwangmi if he could find the man who just come out of the Yoonggil building, Jumi's place of residence. He also informed Gwangmi that from his observation, the guy was not an expert at what he was doing and was purposely stalking Jumi. He also stated that the man looked like he wanted to make a name for himself by starting his run with Jumi, and Gwangmi claimed to have seen the guy. Yoongyo asked Gwangmi where he saw the guy. It was then that Jumi remembered that she had something she had written down. It was some details about the creepy customer that she got from the cafe's CCTV, and wrote down with the hope that she would meet someone like the man Yoongyo was speaking with. Jumi rushed, got the list, and handed it over to Yoongyo. Before the call ended, Yoongyo asked Gwangmi to contact him once he found the man, and in the coldest tone ever. He told Gwangmi to make sure he brought the man back alive. Jumi just sat there shaken by Yoongyo's tone when he turned to her and noticed how frightened she looked. She was startled again, the second her eyes met his, but he calmed her down by reaching into his pocket and pulling out the note she gave him without saying a word. Jumi took the note and thanked Yoongyo, with her mind filled with his good deeds. Yes, he broke her phone, but he handed her the note she gave him. Like it was precious. There's also the fact that he stayed and had someone tracking down the stalker. I'm sure no one would have expected Yoongyo to be this kind, and at that point, Jumi was still unable to decipher the type of person Yoongyo was. Yoongyo had felt he was done with all his good deeds, so he decided to see himself out. Jumi, on the other hand, was not ready to let him go and held on to his arm, seeking to know if he was leaving. Although Yoongyo was silent, his facial expression screamed that he was disgusted. Jumi, on noticing this, claimed that the reason why she was asking was because Yoongyo just arrived and wanted to leave so soon. Jumi's words made Yoongyo feel even more uncomfortable, so he rebuked Jumi. Yoongyo warned Jumi to refrain from awkwardly flirting with him, but she told him that she was not trying to flirt with him. Instead, she was worried about the stalker and didn't know if he would come back or not. Yoongyo asked Jumi if she was trying to ask him to spend the entire night guarding her. Jumi couldn't even believe herself at that point, but she saw Yoongyo as a safer option than the stalker. She tried drying her tears to explain to Yoongyo that she wasn't necessarily asking him to guard her, but he just turned away from her and headed to her fridge. The guy was acting like he owned the house, so Jumi asked him what he was doing. To her surprise, Yoongyo came back with a bottle of wine. He then poured some of the wine into a cup and handed it over to her to drink. Like an obedient puppy, Jumi did as Yoongyo asked while he watched her. After Jumi was done gulping down the first glass, she requested for another, which surprised Yoongyo. Before receiving the next glass of wine, Jumi pleaded with Yoongyo not to tell her father that he had helped her out. She told Yoongyo that she was afraid her father would get overly worried about her if he found out about the whole stalker fiasco, but Yoongyo responded by flicking his young. He went on to pour her another glass, and the effects of her fear and the wine began to kick in. These effects led Jumi to ask Yoongyo to stay with her at least until she finished the cup of wine she was holding. Yoongyo tried to protest, but Jumi pleaded that the reason why she was asking him to do this was because she was scared. Yoongyo, being the busy man he was, told Jumi that she was bothering him, but Jumi pleaded with him to continue helping her a bit since he was already helping her. Yoongyo remained stubborn nonetheless and claimed she was wasting his time. Because of the way Yoongyo was acting, Jumi decided to play the "you owe me" card and reminded Yoongyo that he had been helping her all along. She also pointed out to Yoongyo that he had asked her not to call the police. Since due to his advice she did not call the police, she saw it fit that he took responsibility for keeping her safe. Her persistence only ended up annoying Yoongyo the more, and he told her that he had had other things to do. Since the card she played did not work, Jumi decided to open up and tell Yoongyo that the real reason why she was so scared was because something like this had happened before. Yoongyo immediately went soft when he heard this and asked Jumi if she was really okay with having him around since he looked so scary. Jumi told Yoongyo that although he was scary and also a bad person, he was a familiar face and he made her feel a little better. Also, Yoongyo was someone that her father knew well. Good reasons if you ask me, but this only made Yoongyo see Jumi as careless. He warned her that carelessness is the most dangerous thing and gave her the go-ahead to drink on, while he watched over her. Later that night, the few glasses of wine ended up being 4 bottles of wine, and still, Jumi wanted more. After her fourth, Jumi began to talk gibberish, which was a sign that she was drunk. In her drunk state, she challenged Yoongyo, who just watched her in disdain. After seeing enough, he decided to help her up, but ended up getting shouted at. The effects of the wine made it impossible for Jumi to recognize Yoongyo, and she felt he was hurting her. Meanwhile, he was trying to help her up. Yoongyo got so angry because of Jumi's behavior that he threatened to throw her out of her own home. The threat did not stop drunk Jumi at all. Instead, she dated him to throw her out. She was not herself at all, and the wines only reminded her of the engagement ceremony of her ex-boyfriend that she attended a week or so ago. The wine had helped Jumi wash away all her boldness, leaving only the pain that the engagement ceremony caused her to feel. The poor girl wished she didn't go for the ceremony. Sure, she had no regrets, but that didn't mean she was not hurting. The once-upon-a-time love of her life got to end up with someone else, and finally, she began to wonder if she lived life correctly. Jumi felt so bad that she even looked back at the 28 years of her life and realized that she spent all that time not doing anything the way she wanted to. She concludes that she was an idiot, especially because love was something everyone tried, but she didn't even do that her own way. She had her father and mother trying to force their vision of an ideal husband on her. Deep down, however, all her parents wanted was the son-in-law of their dreams and not her happiness. Due to the influence of the wine, Jumi started thinking out loud and complained that nothing was going her way. During this time, Yoongyo watched Jumi and advised her not to do something she would regret later. Without thinking, Jumi told Yoongyo that she just doesn't regret a few things, but regrets her entire life. She claimed she would not live in regret anymore and accidentally leaned on Yoongyo's chest. It was when Jumi leaned on Yoongyo's chest that she realized that Yoongyo's heart was also beating. Because of Yoongyo's beating heart, Jumi leaned in more and began to feel warmth on her cheek. That was a better feeling than she had thought. Jumi ended up enjoying the experience, But Yoongyo, who had started feeling uncomfortable, cautioned her for leaning on him. Jumi worsened everything by complimenting the size of Yoongyo's chest. Yoongyo was still trying to get Jumi to get her act together, but she was too drunk to listen. As all this was going on, Yoongyo got a call. It was Gwangmi, and he was probably calling because he had news on the stalker. It also looked like he was calling Yoongyo to come see him, but with Jumi holding on firmly to him, Yoongyo knew he couldn't just up and leave. Yoongyo told Gwangmi he would not be able to come, and as their on-call conversation continued, Jumi didn't hear a thing they were saying. Her mind was too fixed on Yoongyo. To her, his face was still the same, but the atmosphere was relaxed, which made her wonder if he was also drunk. Jumi studied Yoongyo's face and saw it as a restrained face. Jumi wanted to know what it would look like to see Yoongyo's restrained face crumble. Jumi saw it as a shame that Yoongyo was angry at her. She told Yoongyo that she could see through his facial expression and the way it kept changing, but that annoyed him even more. Yoongyo then broke free from Jumi's hold and stepped away from her, warning her that she kept crossing the boundaries he had set. Yoongyo also wanted to lock the door, but Jumi didn't let him. He held on to his sleeves and earnestly thanked him. As she thanked Yoongyo, Yoongyo just stood there, tired of telling her to behave herself. This gave Jumi the courage to feel Yoongyo's face, and his warm face reminded her of the face of her ex that just got engaged. Jumi had desired such warmth for a very long time and was determined to never again let anyone take away what belonged to her. Jumi promised herself that she would not back down to people like her father or Yoongyo if it meant her getting what she wanted. The longer Jumi held on to Yoongyo, the more emotional she got and ended up breaking down. It looked like she had finally gotten control of herself and was no longer operating under the influence of the bottles of wine she had. Wholeheartedly, Jumi begged Yoongyo not to go or leave her. Since he seemed to listen to her, her courage just maximum, and she moved in for a kiss, promising to never let go of such warmth again. After the first lip contact, Yoongyo tried to hold himself and warned Jumi that her flirting tricks would not work on him. Even though he sounded confident, Yoongyo's gentlemanliness was wavering. He found himself struggling not to fall for Jumi, while wondering if his inability to resist was because he was also drunk as well. Yoongyo still tried to stand his ground and rebuked Jumi once more, with the claim that he did not want to fool around with her. Jumi still didn't listen to Yoongyo, but then Yoongyo observed Jumi's ankle and felt that Jumi had twisted her ankle while she was running away from the stalker earlier. He tried to message it, but Jumi told him that he got the wrong ankle, yet her voice only tempted Yoongyo the more. Yoongyo hit the climax and decided to give in. Before finally falling, Yoongyo stated that since they were both drunk, they could get heated and blame it on their drunken state. He also saw it as nothing for a little mischief to go down under the influence of alcohol. Just like that, the moment Yoongyo had been resisting all along finally happened. He had heard a lot about Jumi from her father, but that moment made him feel like she was different from the person her father described. So that was it. That was the night that led to Jumi becoming an expectant mother. The following day, Yoongyo arrived at work smiling because of how well his night went. He was waiting on the elevator when someone called out to him. The person who called out to Yoongyo shared with him that he had captured the man he told him about the previous day. From the way the guy spoke, it was clear that he was Gwangmi, and he had kept the man alive as Yoongyo requested. When we finally see the guy's face, we realize that we have seen this man one too many times in the future. It's quite cool that Gwangmi was someone that we knew, and I'm glad he's much more than a silent side character. Gwangmi was trying to pass some important information about last night to Yoongyo, but he was hesitating, which meant that what he wanted to say was truly important. Gwangmi ended up gathering enough courage to speak up, but before he could say anything, the elevator door slid open. In the elevator was a very beautiful woman in red, who looked like she was going to be a big deal later on. The lady in red, when she saw Yoongyo, walked up to him with a smile on her face and told him that if she had known, she would have waited longer at work. The woman's name was Song Hyung, and she was also a director at the company. We know this when Gwangmi bowed respectfully to greet her. Director Song, with a smile on her face, cracked a joke about coffee and alcohol looking good on their own, but tasting even better when both are taken together. We all know that was Director Song's way of saying she and Yoongyo would be good together. But Yoongyo totally snubbed her comment and moved toward the elevator. Director Song was taken aback by Yoongyo's rudeness that morning, but still, she wished him good luck and announced her intention to see him later. With Director Song out of the way and just Yoongyo and Gwangmi in the elevator, the vibe in the elevator was ice cold. Suddenly, Yoongyo asked Gwangmi for a name. The request caught Gwangmi off guard, but then Yoongyo made it clear that he was asking for the name of the stalker. From the way he asked, it was obvious that the stalker was about to feel a bucket load of Yoongyo's wrath. Later that morning, Yoongyo's presence was announced to the chairman of the company, who looked like he had been waiting for Yoongyo all along. The old chairman asked Yoongyo to have a seat, which he did, before the men went into sharing some informal remarks. It was Yoongyo that went first, when he praised the old man for being a busy person, yet still finding the time to visit the company often. The old man, in response to that remark, laughed at it, before claiming that Yoongyo was being sarcastic. The chairman, in a rather casual tone, pointed out that his wife just saw herself out and Yoongyo must have bumped into her on his way in. From the picture on the chairman's desk, we got to know that the chairman's wife was Director Song, which explained why Yoongyo reacted that way when she tried to flirt with him. From the moment the old chairman made mention of his wife, the vibe in the room changed. All of a sudden, he asked about Choi Jumi, Mr. Choi's daughter. Although the question sounded plain and the chairman's tone was casual, his question carried a sinister aura. The old man added that no matter how many times he set Yoongyo up, Yoongyo should like his partner. Sure, we thought Yoongyo was running it all, but this man's entry into the frame helps us realize that he was probably Yoongyo's boss and the brain behind Yoongyo getting to know Jumi. The chairman's name is Kwon. We get to know that from Yoongyo's thoughts about him. From Yoongyo's thoughts, we also get to know that Chairman Kwon saw him as a son, but was trying to get him a partner. He was doing this because of something that had to do with his third wife, Director Song. It all started at a party when Chairman Kwon caught his wife, Director Song, staring lustfully at Yoongyo. He didn't like it one bit and decided to tell Yoongyo that he had to get married. The chairman also felt he was being too careless and tried sweet-talking Yoongyo into getting a woman for himself. That day, Chairman Kwon told Yoongyo that he had already set up someone for him, Jumi, the daughter of Executive Director Choi, whom he saw a few days back. Chairman Kwon also saw Jumi's father as a man who had done great things and still showed promise. With the excuse that Yoongyo could work hand-in-hand with Jumi's father for the greater good of the company, he asked Yoongyo to play along. Yoongyo didn't want to do it. He already knew the arranged relationship was because the chairman feared that one day Yoongyo would come after his wife. But still, Yoongyo went along with the old man's plan. Back to the day after Yoongyo spent a night with Jumi. Yoongyo was suddenly convinced that love, an emotion he thought he would never feel, was possible for him to feel after all. He had always seen the mixing of hearts as a dangerous act, mostly because he saw it shake the cold heart of the chairman, which he once thought was unshakable. He didn't understand why something he saw as insignificant could shake someone as strong as the chairman until he had a taste of what they called love. Yoongyo was lost in thought when suddenly the chairman's secretary walked in and asked the chairman if he wanted another cup of coffee. The sly old man asked that another cup be brought to him and asked Yoongyo to have a cup as well. To taunt Yoongyo, Chairman Kwon made a comment about how his wife made him a good meal, which was why he was washing it down with tea. Yoongyo, being the cold man he was, ignored the comment and decided to talk about business. He told Chairman Kwon that he had gotten a call from Japan about business and offered to handle it by himself. Chairman Kwon immediately caught on to what Yoongyo was trying to say and permitted him to do as he pleased since he was a busy man. He also told Yoongyo that he did not need his approval to do anything, since he has never complained about the work he did or how he did it. Later that morning, at Jumi's cafe, Jumi's employee pointed out that she didn't look too well and asked if she drank too much the day before. Jumi, who was initially surprised by the question, responded that she had just drunk a little the day before. The concerned employee had noticed that Jumi was on her third glass of espresso and advised her to drink lemon honey tea. Jumi welcomed the idea, but her head ached seriously, and her memories from last night were incomplete. From what little Jumi was able to piece together, however, she knew that she had a heated moment with Yoongyo, and that made her feel strange. Jumi began to scold herself for getting intimate with Yoongyo, who she had seen just a few times, just because she was drunk. Jumi's thoughts from the previous night made her face glow red from embarrassment, but it also made her look like she had a fever. Concerned, her employee asked her if she had a fever, but she denied having one and dismissed the employee. With that out of the way, Jumi's employee got the opportunity to tell her that the creepy customer did not show up that day. She soon started to feel worried and wondered if Yoongyo really took care of the guy. Since it was morning and Jumi's head was clear, she began to wonder if involving Yoongyo was the right thing to do. Sure, she had no issue with the man being a gangster, but she also did not question his work ethic, but feared that they might have dragged more problems to themselves. Away from the creepy customer, Jumi's mind went back to the heated moment. She told herself it was nothing more than a one-night affair, even though it was her first time indulging in a one-night affair. Jumi also believed that their little heated moment was not a big deal for a man like Yoongyo. She also didn't have much memory from the incident, so she wanted to see what happened yesterday as a one-night affair. She was still lost in thought when the cafe's bell rang, and her friend Hyson walked in cheerfully. As soon as she greeted Jumi, she realized that something was off about her. Out of concern, she asked Jumi if something happened last night, but Jumi tried to dodge the question. Sadly, she failed, as Hyson could tell she was experiencing a hangover and wanted to know the person she drank with last night. Hyson then jokingly asked Jumi if she stayed up all night because of Yoongyo, but Jumi just brushed off her question by announcing her need for a cup of coffee. This made Hyson worry more and ask Jumi if she was really okay. She also wanted to know why Jumi didn't answer her calls. It was then that Jumi recalled that her phone screen broke and told Hyson. Her worried friend then complained about how terrible hangovers feel, before suddenly remembering some gossip about how Jung Yoongyo, the woman who was getting married to Jumi's ex. Apparently, she got pregnant before marriage. Jumi was clearly shocked to hear that and suddenly went deaf, unable to listen to Hyasun's further rambling because her thoughts were louder. She thought about how the natural order of things is an engagement before marriage and then pregnancy. Nevertheless, she wasn't surprised that Jung Yoongyo was pregnant before the marriage. As Jumi's friend noticed her change of mood after the question, she sought to know if she shouldn't have spilt the tea. Jumi then tried to act cool and claimed it was okay, as she knew she couldn't feel angry about this after what she had done the night before. In the end, Hysun didn't buy Jumi's claim to be okay and suggested they go out. To rope her into coming, she praised her sense of interior design and asked Jumi to accompany her to check out furniture for her new home. Initially, our girl didn't want to tag along, but after a little nudge from Hysun, she did. The pair hung out till nighttime, when Jumi visited a phone store to get a new phone. Hysun was quite surprised that she got a new phone so soon, but even she felt she got the phone sooner than she expected. With all the new phone talk out of the way, Hysun offered to buy Jumi dinner because she was the reason why Jumi stayed out so late. To her surprise, Jumi declined the offer. She claimed that she had to go home on time because the 5 cups of coffee she had earlier had started weighing on her. Hysun got concerned when she heard this and asked Jumi if she was okay since she looked tired all day. She also wanted to know if she was the cause of her friend's tiredness, but Jumi assured her she wasn't. On the contrary, she was glad they went out because it helped her enjoy some fresh air. She then asked Hysun if her boyfriend was going to pick her up. With a cheeky smile on her face, Hysun confirmed he was on his way, after which she thanked Jumi and went her way. Jumi just stood there watching Hysun as she walked into the night. She could see that Hysun looked happy and felt it was because Hysun was about to get married. Initially, Jumi wanted to head home, but suddenly didn't feel like going home again. She didn't know what to do, but then dialed Yoongyo's number. Even though Jumi didn't feel comfortable around the guy, he had helped her the day before, and she saw it wise to repay him by buying him dinner. She recalled that the previous night she was so scared, but when Yoongyo came into the picture, she felt like he was the only place she could hide. However, she couldn't bring herself to call him, as what went down after she drank the night before couldn't get out of her head. She was really ashamed because of what she did and felt like apologizing to Yoongyo. She even considered moving just to get away from him and scolded herself for causing so much trouble. As Jumi thought about all this, she dragged herself home. When she finally was a few meters away from her place, she spotted a shady-looking vehicle parked in a corner. The vehicle alone made Jumi feel uncomfortable, only for the driver to come out and greet her with a bow. She got even more frightened and was shocked at the same time. Just to be sure, she asked the man if her father sent him. The man replied that he was sent by Yoongyo, so Jumi began to wonder why he would do such a thing. At first, she felt Yoongyo had sent the man to protect her because of what happened last night, but before drawing any conclusions, she asked the man why he was sent to her. To her surprise, the man just walked to the car's boot and opened it for her to see. There was someone in it. She didn't recognize the person at first, but after a bit, she realized it was the stalker. Immediately, he saw Jumi. The stalker begged her to spare him, but she still hadn't recovered from the astonishment she was experiencing. Yoongyo's man, without wasting any time, went on to drop facts for Jumi to prove that he had indeed captured the stalker. She didn't understand why he was telling her all this and decided to ask him what his reasons were. The man simply told her that he was only following Yoongyo's orders to ask her to confirm if they had gotten the right guy. Jumi indeed wanted to deal with the stalker, but the position he was in at the time made her pity him. Yoongyo's man, however, did not understand her silence and took it that Jumi was trying to tell him to handle things himself. When she heard this, Jumi decided to ask the man if he wanted to end the stalker. The man claimed he didn't know because he was going to follow whatever orders Yoongyo would give him. Before leaving, he casually bid Jumi goodbye and drove off. All that had happened made Jumi's head hurt, so she decided to give Yoongyo a call. She hadn't expected that a reason like this would be why she'd call him for the first time after that night, but we don't always get what we want now, do we? When Yoongyo finally picked up, he asked Jumi to be brief with whatever she was about to say. Then she asked if he wanted to end the stalker's life. Yoongyo casually replied that he would do as he pleased since she left the decision to him. On hearing this, she argued that Yoongyo was taking things too far. She confessed her regret for involving him and told him that if she knew he was going to react this way, she would have endured the stalking. She added that things went down the way they did because she asked for it and was about telling him to stand down when he decided to speak up. Yoongyo started by asking Jumi if she would dare tell him to his face that everything was her fault. When she tried to explain that he was misunderstanding her, Yoongyo replied that it was better to settle things the easy way instead of taking the long way. He then mocked Jumi for not wanting to get involved with dangerous things and feeling guilty because someone might die because of her. Then with a colder tone, he told Jumi to think about how selfish she was before he hung up. His words made Jumi realize that she was truly a hypocrite. She could also see that she always acted out of hypocrisy, which made her a coward. With that in mind, she dragged herself home and collapsed at the door the second she walked in. She felt bad because she hadn't planned for things to turn out the way they did, and she felt like she was getting sucked into a mess. She was feeling down, but when she looked around and saw how scattered her place was, Jumi decided to clean it up. In no time, the room was spotless. She felt fulfilled because of how hard she worked, at least until she kicked against one of the bottles she chugged the night before. The bottle only reminded her about what happened the previous night, which made her feel worse. She couldn't believe she acted so freely with someone like Yoongyo. She recalled that she was a mess. Meanwhile, she couldn't recall the look on his face. Everything up till that point made Jumi ask herself what she was really trying to do. She wondered if she asked for too much by just wanting a normal life, and her mind went back to her high school days. Back then, everyone talked about her because her father was a gangster. They felt she was swimming in money, and everyone around her just wanted to take advantage of her. But in the midst of all this, Jumi kept her cool. Everything was normal. No one got hurt, until the day a kid tossed a volleyball at Jumi. He apologized, however, and claimed he didn't see her, but it was obvious he was just doing that to spite her. As usual, Jumi simply ignored the guy, but something unexpected happened the following day. The guy came to school with a swollen eye, and everyone wanted to know how he got it. He didn't want to say anything, but then one of the kids recognized him as the guy who threw a ball at Jumi the previous day. That event caused everyone to be afraid of her, as they believed anyone who would go after her would face the wrath of her father. Even then, Jumi said nothing. Everywhere she went, because of her father's reputation, she was surrounded by noise. However, she always felt lonely. If only they saw her as Choi Jumi and not as the daughter of a gangster, she felt her life would have been better. From then until she grew up, nothing changed. She didn't ask for all the complex stuff she was going through and just wanted a simple life where she could fall in love, get married, and start a family. You know, that ordinary but special stuff. She knew how her life was set out to go, was not set on stones, but knew it was ridiculous to think there is such a thing as a future one could create from him or herself. Jumi was already going through some hard times, only for her to get a call from Taeju. For a second, she stared at her screen, wondering who Taeju was, before recalling he was that guy her mother set her up with. You know, the one whose father owns a hospital. Because he called Jumi, they agreed to meet up the following day, and he looked happy to see her. Jumi, on the other hand, felt guilty that she forgot to call Taeju, so after responding to his greeting, she apologized for not giving him a call. Taeju acted like he was okay with Jumi not calling him and blamed it on her being busy. He also asked Jumi if she was there for just him or him and something else. It was another shade at the fact that she didn't call him first, so Jumi assured him he was seeing things wrongly since she planned to contact him. Well, that was because she had something to tell him. After they went into the hotel and got seated, Jumi confessed to Taeju that she went on the blind date with him because of her mother. Nevertheless, she had no intention of getting married for the time being. Sure, that was the excuse she gave Taeju, but deep down she knew that her mother couldn't beat her dad. In the end, he would have his way, so it was better to end things fast. Even though she already knew that, she didn't plan on meekly accepting to marry Yoongyo, like her dad wanted. Her words seemed to hurt Taeju, who claimed to understand things from her angle, but felt it would have been better for her to fix a special day for them to meet, before she ended things. She then repeated something she heard before, as she told Taeju that even if she was rejected, it didn't seem like she said anything wrong. On hearing this, Taeju confessed that he had called Jumi because he wanted a second date and ended up being rejected spectacularly. She apologized for how he was feeling and offered to treat him to dinner. It was just a friendly gesture, but Taeju assumed Jumi was doing that to sympathize with him. She wasn't, and she made that very clear by stating she was not in a position to pity anyone. She also told Taeju that she came to see him because she didn't want her mother to set up another date without telling her, so she didn't want him to think too much about the rejection. It was then that Taeju admitted that he called Jumi because her mother reached out to him. He informed her that her mother seemed curious because Jumi hadn't reported anything back to her. The fact that Jumi knew what her mother was up to made her feel even more frustrated. Because of that, she asked Taeju if he wanted to get married to her, or was just doing everything because of the benefits both families were to gain. That question was similar to what Yoongyo asked her on her first date with him, although he put it in different lines. When she realized this, Jumi asked Taeju to forget what she said. Still, he didn't listen and answered the question anyway. He confessed that he actually wanted to get married to Jumi and told her about how his father wanted him to go to med school and take over the family business. He did this to explain to her that he actually didn't want to do his father's will. And when he came for the date, he did it because of his father. With that information out of the bag, he confessed that it would be sad if he was the only honest side, and that would be suffocating. His honest words made Jumi prematurely conclude that he was a good person, as she had seen her fair share of bad people, and he was nothing like those people. In the end, Taeju agreed that it was better they ended things on the spot, without crying, but also expressed hope in the fact that the future remained uncertain. He hoped that maybe in that future, Jumi would change her mind and they would get back together seriously. It was because of this, he teasingly confessed he couldn't let go of her and she wanted to know if he was teasing her. Taeju claimed he wasn't teasing Jumi, but she sat there feeling scared because of how sincere Taeju's smile looked. As the conversation lingered on, Taeju noticed Jumi had not taken a sip of her wine and wanted to know if she was okay. She simply told him that she was going to stop drinking for a while, right before they headed out. Once they were out of the hotel, Taeju offered Jumi a ride home, but she declined his offer. Her excuse for doing so was that she had someplace to be, so he let her go on her own. It's no surprise that the place Jumi went to was Woosung. It was the company her father worked for that was headed by Jung Yoongyo. It was her first time visiting the company alone, and its huge size made her feel uneasy. She came intending to discuss the stalker issue and also the events that took place that night when she was tipsy. Although she didn't know everything that happened that night, she came with the hope that she would discover one major thing. Whatever that thing was, we were about to find out. Because it was her first time alone, Jumi didn't know where Yoongyo's office was and had to go to the counter to ask for directions. The receptionist was about telling her to leave because her identity was not verified, when one of Yoongyo's men spotted her. He then walked over to Jumi and the receptionist and asked her why she didn't tell him about her visit. She told the man that it was something that came up unexpectedly, before asking him to guide her to Yoongyo's office. He was glad to help Jumi and asked her to follow him. On her way to Yoongyo's office, she had to pass by some of Yoongyo's shady-looking men, who made her feel uncomfortable. She really didn't like the world Yoongyo and her father lived in, because it was surrounded by death. It was because of this that they lived in the present, without thinking about the future. By living that way, they could easily let go of everything without regret when death came knocking. Suddenly, Jumi's guide noticed she wasn't looking so good. Out of concern, he approached her and asked if she was okay. She claimed she was fine and asked the man not to tell her father she had come around. She only planned to say a few words to Yoongyo and be on her way. When she finally arrived at his office, she met him seated so calmly at his desk. The first thing she did was ask about the stalker. She was curious to know whether he ended the man's life, and from Yoongyo's silence, concluded that he didn't. He seemed uninterested in talking about the stalker and gave Jumi the go-ahead to argue. All she did was agree with him that he was right about her. She was scared and already knew what would happen if she asked him for help, but still asked for his help. Nevertheless, she still didn't want anyone to die for her sake, whether it was hypocritical or not. With that out of the way, Jumi went on to discuss their moment of intimacy a few days ago. It was then we got to know the major thing she wanted to ask Yoongyo, was if he used protection or not. From the proud smile on his face, it was obvious he didn't think towards that angle. Jumi could tell, but she kept pushing and stated that when she checked the trash, she didn't see any protection wraps. After what had happened, she expected to find some, but then Yoongyo confidently told her that she asked him not to pull out. She was shocked to hear that while Yoongyo casually pulled out a cigarette. He believed she was asking questions she already knew the answers to. Meanwhile, she was shocked by his cold responses. It turned out she made crazier requests than she had thought, so she tried willing herself to calm down. Yoongyo wanted to know if Jumi was afraid of becoming fat and round, but she claimed not to be worried because she was on contraceptives. She then wanted to know why Yoongyo wasn't worried, but then he told her that it was because he would take responsibility for the child no matter what. His words pissed Jumi off, so she boldly told him that what happened between them was just one completely meaningless one-night stand. Jumi told herself that since they were both drunk and not in their right minds, it was just another night out of many that happened. She advised him not to read meaning into what happened, since doing that wouldn't be proper. She believed that someone like Yoongyo would be smart enough to understand what she was saying and concluded it was no big deal. However, she was wrong. Yoongyo didn't see what happened as meaningless and wanted to know why Jumi was trying so hard to deny it. To show how serious he was, Yoongyo put out his cigarette and asked Jumi if she was thinking about other men during their moment of intimacy. His comment caught her off guard and made her wonder if he was talking about her ex Junghyun. That night, she actually thought about him, but it was for a moment, even though she never had the intention of thinking about him that day. Even though that happened, Jumi was certain there was no way Yoongyo could know she thought about Junghyun, because he couldn't read her thoughts. Yoongyo still pushed the topic and claimed he might have had similarities with someone she was once with. It was then that Jumi lost her cool and demanded to know what made Yoongyo feel so sure about his name. She recalled calling his name that night, but then she goes quiet as she realized that the more she talked, the deeper she got sucked into everything. To help matters, Jumi tried to explain what she meant. Yoongyo didn't let her do that, however. Instead, he firmly told her that whether she had him in mind or another man in mind was not his business. He was done, since Jumi said it was a meaningless one-night stand and asked Jumi to get out. Jumi stood there angrily, thinking about how cruel Yoongyo was, but then he rudely asked her why she was still there. Because of his tone, Jumi angrily marched out of his office. She wasn't okay, but then things got even more bothersome, as her father gave her a call. Jumi could tell he was calling because he knew she was at Woosung and explained to him that she only came to run a short errand. She added that she was on her way home anyway and planned to say what she wanted to say, to him in person. Although her father seemed annoyed, Jumi ignored his mood and asked if her mother was around, since she wanted to speak with both of them. After that, she hung up and heaved a deep sigh of frustration. She was truly tired, especially because things kept going in the direction she was not okay with. With all that was happening, Jumi knew better than anyone that it was best to just give up. This was because she could tell nothing would change, even if she tried. It was with that resolve that she went on the blind dates without saying a word, as in the end, she was going to settle down with a man her parents would choose. Her parents were proud of her and saw her as a good woman. They had planned her life from the onset. The planning was so deep that her mother painted her future like it was her own. Her mother even told her that one day she would place her in the position of a wife of a good family. In Jumi's mother's vision, what she wanted was not even important, which actually made her feel bad. Jumi was still lost in thoughts when one of her father's men approached her and offered her a ride home. Normally, she would have declined the offer, but she was too tired to go home on her own and accepted the offer. Jumi and her escort then headed to the elevator, where they waited for its doors to slide open. Unfortunately for her, while she was waiting, Yoongyo came from behind her and pointed out that she was going home late that day. Fate was playing games with Jumi because when Yoongyo arrived, the elevator doors finally opened. He walked in first, and instead of waiting for him so she'd get on the next time, she walked in boldly. As she did so, she kept telling herself not to react because if she reacted, she would lose to Yoongyo. It would have been easier if she said nothing, however, but Jumi decided to take a shot at Yoongyo. She did so by pointing out that she had to come to a place she didn't want to be because of someone. Yoongyo could tell the shit was directed at him, so he asked Jumi if she was always so rude. She claimed she wasn't always that way, but lately had unintentionally become rude. Just in case, Jumi informed Yoongyo that he didn't need to escort her, since she already had someone to accompany her. When the elevator doors opened, she headed out first, certain that she didn't want to meet Yoongyo again. She didn't want anything to do with him, since every time she saw him, something went wrong. She didn't know why she felt so pathetic at the time. Then she had a bad feeling and looked toward Yoongyo. The thought of facing that arrogant man made her heart burn with intense emotions. The intensity was growing so powerfully that it left Jumi feeling terrified. She was experiencing a gut feeling, and those were hardly ever wrong. Yoongyo, on the other hand, was oblivious to Jumi's growing resentment towards him as Gwangmi drove him home. Suddenly, he started muttering words to himself that made Gwangmi feel a bit uncomfortable. All the muttering was because he was thinking about how he and Jumi's night together was clearly a mistake. The whole thing from start to finish was a mistake. But at the same time, he didn't see it as a mistake. He confessed to himself that although everything happened impulsively and under the influence, so he lost some of his control. Yoongyo saw him losing his judgment as the only problem. Until that night, no matter how drunk he was, he had never had an intimate moment with a woman for the sake of it. To no one in particular, Yoongyo said that it was unbelievable the way things turned out. It was so serious to him that he didn't see it as a laughing matter. In the end, he blamed everything on the night Chairman Kwon set him and Jumi up. That night, Jumi's father, Executive Director Choi, was acting oddly nice to the chairman to show his gratitude for being invited to see him. Although the meeting aimed at matching up Jumi and Yoongyo, Chairman Kwon wanted to know if Executive Director Choi could handle the Han River construction issue. Jumi's father, while sounding confident, just asked the chairman if he had any questions concerning the Han River construction issue. During the meeting, Yoongyo was bored, only for Chairman Choi to silently ask him if he saw Jumi as pretty. He suggested that Yoongyo think about settling down and getting married. Surprisingly, he refused. He had noted that Jumi had an expressionless face and a smile never reached her eyes. He also found it strange that she didn't flinch in such an atmosphere or meeting, and felt that much was to be expected from Director Choi's daughter. The sly chairman then addressed Jumi. He started by praising her beauty, before suggesting that Jumi became friends with his third wife. It was then she spoke up, coldly stating that she did not have a good personality and felt she wouldn't get along with his wife. Her words almost made her father choke on his drink, while Chairman Kwon praised her for being so sincere. He confessed that he had never heard someone speak like her, so she added that her father kept saying she was blunt. The comment managed to get Chairman Kwon laughing, as he praised Jumi for being more daring than she appeared. Her father wasn't happy, however, and warned her to stop talking that way. The chairman then told him it was okay, since young people should have that kind of resolve. Even Yoongyo took note of Jumi's attitude. It left him wondering how she could stay so composed before the chairman of the Woosung group. He couldn't tell whether her reaction was because she was fearless or simply didn't care. While thinking on this, he stares at Jumi, and when their eyes met, they maintained eye contact for some seconds before she looked away. He concluded that maybe Jumi was fearless and also didn't care. Also, her strangely calm aura stayed in his mind. On the day Yoongyo was to meet Jumi for their first date, you know, the day he kept her waiting for 4 hours, Gwangmi called him to tell him she was still waiting at the meeting place. He called when Jumi had waited for just 2 hours. Because of how persistent she remained, Yoongyo decided to handle things himself. He then let her wait for another 2 hours before showing up. When he came and she was still there, he couldn't tell whether she was stupid or clever. He just stood from a distance and watched Jumi. She didn't know he was there, then her phone rang. It was Hysun, who wanted to know if she was going for an engagement party. Jumi assured her she was. Hysun then asked Jumi about her blind date, and she described Yoongyo as better than Junghyun all round. She also claimed she had high standards and wasn't the type of woman to hang out with just anyone. Those lines were what made Yoongyo stay, even though he already planned to leave. When she hung up, Yoongyo walked over to her, a decision he ended up regretting. He felt that going back to Jumi was his first mistake, and he should have turned around instead of engaging. It was because he didn't turn away back then that he ended up in her house protecting her the night they got intimate. Throughout his time with her, Jumi had always been like a wax figure to him. But that night she opened up to him. Due to his mischievous curiosity, he wanted to see how she looked when she completely lost it. He gave her more wine to bring out the human in her, and even though he was not expecting to get intimate with her, he failed at controlling his urges and made the mistake. He couldn't understand why Jumi drank the way she did that night, and felt that maybe she did so because she desperately wanted to forget everything. He even recalled telling her that he was nothing like Jung Hyun, the man who he felt robbed her and made her cold. He wondered who that man was. Yoongyo's curiosity only made him feel like he had lost his mind. His mind then went back to the conversation he had with Jumi earlier. Because of his overthinking, Yoongyo looked troubled, so Gwangmi got concerned and asked him if he was okay. He didn't hear the question, as his thoughts were still on Jumi. He recalled warning her not to play with fire, but she did anyway, which pissed him off. The drive home continued nonetheless, but Yoongyo felt uncomfortable that he was the only one who remembered what happened that night. In the next scene, Jumi had arrived at her home. At the door, her mother scolded her for hardly coming home. She didn't see why the CEO of what she saw as a small cafe was so scarce. Jumi, nevertheless, told her mother she was overstepping like she normally did. Her mother was annoyed by the response and declared it was pointless to raise children. Without wasting any time, she wanted to know what happened with the son of the hospital director. Jumi replied to her mother with some questions of her own. First, she wanted to know if children existed for their parents. She then wanted to know if it was what parents wanted that mattered, before asking her mother why she kept talking the way she did. After provoking Jumi, her mother accused her of arguing with someone and coming home to blow off steam. The next thing her mother did was observe her face and ask her if she had been getting massages lately, since her face was so rough. While the mother and daughter discussed, Jumi's father came into the room from the shower. As soon as he arrived, he stated that Jumi was acting like coming home would make her lose her freedom. When Jumi welcomed him, he ignored her and added that he knew from the start that when Jumi left her parents behind, she would go live with someone and start a small shop. Jumi boldly defended her business, stating that what mattered was that it was her cafe and not a small shop. Executive Director Choi decided to let the argument slide because he wanted to know why Jumi went to the company earlier. She told her father that since she went on a date with Yoongyo that was arranged by him, it wasn't strange for her to go meet him again. Her father didn't see that as strange. Even so, what he saw as strange was how she initially didn't have an interest in Yoongyo, and then suddenly she wanted to meet him. To him, that proved that Jumi had a heart, which he originally felt she didn't have. Jumi could see that her father was unto her, but dodged his suspicions and suggested that if he didn't like how things were going, she should end the relationship. Her father was annoyed by those words, but that wasn't all Jumi had to say. She went on to declare that she would no longer see either Yoongyo or the hospital director's son. The news caused Jumi's mother to spot out her tea in shock, but that didn't stop her from going on. She made it clear that they could no longer threaten her with her store. It was what she used to survive, and that was at stake, so she wanted them to respect her. Hearing that Jumi saw the shop as what sustained her, had her father laughing at first. After which he rudely mocked her by demanding to know when she expected to get her money's worth from the coffee shop. To him, she was joking, and if she got married, they would get their money's worth. Jumi's Agree's father added that they had given Jumi jewelry, paid for her education, fed her, clothed her, and even gave her a cafe. With all they had done, he expected some gratitude from his daughter. All the harshness made Jumi's mother feel uncomfortable, so she pleaded with her husband, begging him to calm down. She also spoke on Jumi's behalf and claimed Jumi already knew all the good they had done for her. Throughout all this time, Jumi felt uncomfortable. A reaction like this was the reason why she didn't want to go see her parents in the first place. Luckily for Jumi, her mother's attempt to calm her father worked. So in a calmer tone, he continued what he was saying about Jumi getting married. It turned out her father was okay with Yoongyo because he was a heartless, calculated man who hated being under anyone's thumb. He was also cold-blooded, a man with qualities that Jumi knew her father liked. From the way she saw things, Yoongyo did not have any humanity, but was good at his job and made a lot of money. Jumi's mind was still on Yoongyo when her father interrupted her thoughts by reminding her of some hotel opening ceremony he already told the host they were attending. At that moment, everything about the meeting annoyed Jumi and left her wondering why her parents had her if they were just going to hand her over to someone else. She felt it was better they had a son instead of her and got up to leave. On her way out, Jumi announced she was going home and wouldn't visit her parents for a while. She also wanted them to know she declined the invitation to the hotel opening ceremony and didn't want to have anything to do with Taeju, the hospital director's son. Although her mother was not okay with the idea, she let her go her way. On her way out, Jumi realized that in truth, all she had belonged to her father. Even the man who volunteered to drive her around was her father's subordinate. Upon the argument with her father, Jumi still accepted the man's offer to drive her home. In the car heading to her house, Jumi thought deeply about how she was told to follow in her father's footsteps because everything she enjoyed was because of him. Also, she was ashamed to admit that she was afraid to stand on her own 2 feet without her parents' help. As she left, she planned to stay away until she was able to keep her head high around her parents. The days after the argument with her parents were peaceful for Jumi, and business was also going great. However, on a certain weekday when the cafe didn't have many customers, Jumi was about to close for the day. She planned to do that after having a glass of lemonade, and while she waited for it to be made, she thought about how Yoongyo was on a trip to Japan. To her, his absence meant things would be peaceful for a while, but then trouble walked into her cafe in the form of a fancily dressed director Song Ha-young, Chairman Kwon's third wife. Since Jumi had never met her before, or seen her before, she simply asked to take her order. Director Song just glared at her, scanning her thoroughly, to the point that she started feeling uncomfortable. After scanning Jumi, the director placed her order and went to take a seat. Although the woman hadn't said anything to her, Jumi felt like the director was staring into her soul from her seat. There was tension in the room, and Jumi's male employee wanted to know if Jumi knew the woman since she kept staring at Jumi. She claimed not to know the woman, and when Jumi's female employee went to see if Director Song wanted anything else, she claimed she didn't. That aside, Jumi found it strange that a woman with such an expensive designer bag and shoes came for a cup of coffee. It didn't make sense to her because she didn't look like the type of person to come just to have a cup of coffee. As Jumi was deeply thinking about this woman, the plate Jumi's make employee, Inho, had in hand, accidentally slipped off his hand and fell. Our girl immediately rushed to Inho's aid. The poor guy was busy worrying about the plates, but Jumi just wanted to know if he was okay. While this commotion was taking place, Jumi's second employee informed Director Song that it was closing time, so she got up and left after politely thanking them for the coffee. When the director left, Jumi's employees discussed her visit. They felt she came because she was checking out the shop to buy it later. Meanwhile, Jumi believed she was interested in more than that. She wasn't allowed to pay more attention to Director Song, however, since her female employee suggested they go out. Inho supported the idea, but Jumi couldn't tag along with them, as she wasn't going to be drinking for a while. To make up for her absence, she offered them her credit card to allow them to get drinks and drink together. Furthermore, she stated that alcohol was only good when you drink it with someone. Her employees were taken aback and concerned by her wish to stay away from alcohol, so they asked her if she was okay. She also didn't look too okay, so they wanted to know if she had anemia. Jumi claimed that she was fine, but just a little dizzy. She then instructed them to close the shop for the day. When they were done setting the store for the next day, Jumi's employees headed out, leaving her alone at the shop. The closing hours stress caught up to Jumi, so she decided to have a little rest before going home. She sat there feeling tense with her bones aching. Those symptoms made her consider the chances of her having body aches. Well, That was until she felt nauseous and started thinking about her might with Yoongyo. To make sure it wasn't what she was thinking, Jumi decided to take some pregnancy tests. From the look on her face, it was clear what the test showed before she even revealed it. The pregnancy test came out positive, a result Jumi prayed not to get. It was her third pregnancy test with the same result. Yet she tried to tell herself the devices were faulty. For a more authentic result, she planned to go to the hospital to confirm. Although she didn't want to believe she was pregnant, Jumi was ready to do away with the child if tests at the hospital confirmed she was pregnant. This was because she didn't see a child born out of one night of lust as a child that would be welcomed by society. Upon everything Jumi was going through at the moment, her father had to add to her issues by ordering her not to be late for the hotel's grand opening. He added that if Jumi wanted to live the way she liked, then she should convince him instead of throwing childish tantrums. Even though she didn't want to go for the grand opening and was already going through a lot, Jumi set aside her emotions and went for the event. Upon entering the hotel, her father's subordinate rushed to welcome her. He told her he had been waiting for her since her father told him she was coming. It didn't take the man too long to notice that Jumi didn't look okay and wanted to know if something was going on with her. Jumi claimed the only problem she had was that she couldn't sleep the night before. These sleepless nights were because Jumi went to the hospital for some tests, where her pregnancy was confirmed. The doctor also told Jumi that birth controls were not 100% effective, something she already knew. After she visited the doctor, Jumi surfed the net for cases of pregnancy even after taking contraceptives. She was relieved to discover that there were many cases like hers, even though that comfort lasted for a few seconds. After that, Jumi spent the rest of the night watching videos of how early pregnancy can cause nausea and dizziness. Back to her conversation with her father's subordinate. The man told her she would be using a private room per the special request of her father. One of the perks of the special request was that Jumi's luggage would be taken to her room for her, but she just asked for her key and promised to handle everything herself. The man then asked her if she wasn't going to attend the opening ceremony that was about to start, and she told him she wasn't going. Her excuse was that there was no one to welcome her there, so there was no need for her to go. Since it was settled that she was going to her room on her own, Jumi permitted the man to get back to what he was doing. He did as he was instructed, leaving Jumi to her thoughts. During her time on her own, Jumi observed her legs and began to wonder why she wore a flat shoe instead of heels. She didn't dwell too long on that thought and observed the room. She noticed that it was busy and hoped to be able to rest without any disturbance. As if life ever gave Jumi what she desired. As usual, life threw another surprise at Jumi by sending Yoongyo her way. Yoongyo came with his army of subordinates, and his presence made Jumi feel uncomfortable. However, she still was able to put together words, and the pair exchanged greetings. His presence at the grand opening ceremony showed that he was back from his trip to Japan, but all Jumi could think about was their last meeting and how rude he was. She had gone there that day to confirm if he used protection or not, and she got her answer. At that moment, she didn't want to bear the responsibility of what she planned to do with the child on her own. She wanted to tell him that she wanted to do away with the child and felt he would agree with her without even thinking. Instead of telling him that, she asked if he came around for the opening ceremony. As she asked, Yoongyo called out to her and told her the elevator was the other way. Turned out she was going the wrong way, if not for his help. Yoongyo still got into the elevator with Jumi. In the elevator, he observed that she was wearing flat shoes, which was unlike her. Just as he was observing her, Jumi felt woozy and fell backwards. Luckily for her, Yoongyo was quick enough to catch her before she fell. To cover his care, he acted rudely and Jumi apologized. She was still in his arms when he asked her what she had been eating lately. It looked like he could tell she had added weight. Meanwhile, Jumi was focused on his strength now and on the night he lifted her. She believed that Yoongyo was still the same rude person, and she was the only one who had changed during their time apart. That feeling made Jumi break free from Yoongyo's hold and return his question, asking him what he usually ate. She pointed out that she had seen him use lobster as an ashtray before she remembered they weren't the only ones in the elevator and called herself to order. To sound more polite, Jumi claimed she was trying to tell Yoongyo that she was eating well and getting around fine. She also apologized for her rude remark and blamed it on her being on edge of late. She hoped he'd understand with her, so he told her that if she wanted to be understood, she should stop acting like a brat. He wanted to know where the sweet and cuddly Jumi went, that all she had left was a rude mess. When the doors opened, Yoongyo offered to guide Jumi to her room, but she declined his offer. According to her, she could see the room right in front of her, but Yoongyo didn't listen. From his angle, Jumi looked like she wouldn't have been able to find the doors by herself. She didn't understand his strange worry, but just let him help her out. In the end, Yoongyo showed Jumi to her room and instructed her to get some rest, after which he and his subordinates went on their way. Jumi noticed that Yoongyo looked like he was doing okay, unlike her, and that made her despise him a little more. In her room, Jumi was finally about to get some rest when her father called. He called to inform her that the press conference for the hotel's grand opening was about to start and wanted to know where she was and what she was doing. She informed him of her intentions to rest a little since she was tired, but her father wasn't cool with the response. He felt that if Jumi wanted to relax, she should have stayed at her coffee shop. He made it clear that he was not asking her to come down, but ordering her to do so, and even though her father never let her catch her breath, Jumi had to listen to him. At the press conference, one of the staff urged all the guests to have their seats as they were about to start. The guests did as they were told, but then Jumi recognized someone on stage. It was director Song, the woman who visited her cafe some nights ago and acted like she wanted to buy their land. Jumi knew there was no way the wife of the chairman would stop by her cafe for no reason and wondered what her intentions were. Thinking too much about the matter only made Jumi to start feeling dizzy and nauseous again. To prevent making a mess at the press conference, she bolted off, intending to get to the bathroom, but she bumped into a guest in the process. She may have ignored the guest and kept heading towards the toilets, but he looked a lot like Yoongyo. After vomiting for a bit, Jumi had some relief. She could see that nothing about her life had changed, except for this child that, even though unnoticed, had come into the picture. As she dragged herself back to her room, Jumi felt as though her whole life was upside down. Nevertheless, she again thought about doing away with the child to help her fix things and return her life to its usual state, before the drowsiness and depression. She was still thinking about taking the child out of the picture when she collapsed and Yoongyo caught her. She was in his arms when he observed her and noticed tears rolling down her cheeks. Out of curiosity, he asked Gwangmi what was wrong with Jumi, but he didn't know what response to give. Yoongyo ended up taking Jumi away. When she woke up, she realized she wasn't in her room. The last thing she remembered was that she was in the bathroom. She began to wonder if she fainted or not, recalling that someone caught her. Suddenly, there was a knock at the door. For some reason, Jumi saw it wise to get the door. To her surprise, the person she met at the door was director Song Hayoung. Are you loving the drama so far? Comment part 4 below for the next part. Also, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, ciao!